Scipius, has been basically the only deck that was any good out of 15 possible paragons. So the game was really bad, really badly balanced. It was all you played against, especially at the higher end of the ladder. I've always been in the top 10 players on the ladder since I started playing in December last year. When Hearthstone came along, everyone was like, oh, no, you can't do this, you can't put it online, this is bullshit, you can't have digital assets, that's ridiculous, we're not going to have our cards in our hands, we're not going to have, this is a joke, this is a rip-off, what a scam.
It also felt like we lost a lot of players from the airdrop phase number 1 to number 2, which is weird because nothing really changed. But yeah, now it's free to play. It's downloadable on Epic Game Store, which is pretty cool. Have you tried it, Sparrows? Illuvium?
Yeah, a little bit, just through the tutorial, and then I finished that, and then I played the first world that you're allowed to play or whatever, and I caught something, and then I haven't really gone back to it since then. I've been trying to branch out and look at too many things at once.
Yeah,
so I haven't had time to go back to Illuvium.
Yeah, you mainly playing parallel, right?
Yeah, I'm a card game player, so everything I do is TCG based, but I'm trying to find other games that I can fit in the meantime. So Pirate Nation's a great one. I've been playing a lot of Pirate Nation. But I'm just trying to find
Nice.
little games like that, really. But yeah, my whole background is TCG, so games like Illuvium are way out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, I think we're getting Gauntlet with TFT, so that could maybe be more in the strategy game genre.
Yeah, you would have been a lot happier when we playtested Illuvium Arena from November to early this, or last year November to early this year, because that's the 1v1 strategy game, right? I think that would have been way more fun, but it's been a bit neglected by just players because there's no airdrop points for it, or there are airdrop points, but very little for it. So everybody's just I don't know, playing for the airdrop thing, right? Figuring out overworld and so on, which I think makes a lot of sense on the Illuvium side, because overworld is the NFT generation side of things, so that has to work on the economy side. The PvP games you can just patch and balance and whatever, and we've seen a lot of games that some patches are pretty bad and some patches can get better again, right? I think Parallel has, my short time in Parallel has had a lot of ups and downs already. I don't know, from super cool to I don't want to play. Yeah. What do you think about Parallel meta right now? I saw Muka is very unhappy about it, for example.
Yeah, I think it's definitely needs a little bit more work, but I personally think it's great, especially compared to the previous metas we've had where it's been just entirely one parallel and really just one, not even just one parallel, one paragon. So for those of you who don't know Parallel very well, there's Parallel are the factions that you play, the classes, and there's 5 of those, and within those 5 there are 3 different characters you can play with each. So for the last month and a half or maybe more, we've had one Parallel be dominant, which is Cathari, and one of the 3 playable characters of Cathari, Scipius, has been basically the only deck that was any good out of 15 possible paragons. So the game was really bad, really badly balanced. A new bunch of cards just dropped, a new set, the first expansion of Parallel just dropped. So that kind of changed the meta a lot. And I think a few cards might have got through testing for Scipius that were a little bit overpowered. And yeah, it was all you played against, especially at the higher end of the ladder. I've always been in the top 10 players on the ladder since I started playing in December last year. So it was pretty much, 90% of matches were just playing against Scipius in Scipi mirrors, and basically whoever went first won. I had a 95% win rate going first, for example, against Scipius. So yeah, it was pretty awful. So thinking about how it's been and how it is now, I think it's much better. Obviously, we've got a long way to go, but I've played myself 11 out of the 15 possible paragons so far since they made the most recent nerfs. And of course, there's a hierarchy within those paragons, but I do think all 11 are playable to some extent. I think there are three that are definitely unplayable. I think Gafar is like playable, but it's a for fun paragon to play. But I think the other 11 are viable. So I feel like the game is in a pretty okay spot. Obviously, there are two paragons that are at the top right now, which is a Neon and or Neve, as it's meant to be pronounced, and Catherine. They're the top two decks, and then there's a few decks that are I would say they're A tier, and then there's a few decks that are B tier, and then there's a few that are in the C tier. But anything can be anything. Even in Master, for example, I played a fair bit of Shoshana in Master, and I beat the guy who finished rank 1 last month, just yesterday, playing Shoshana against him. So I really do think that there are 11 playable paragons. So I feel like the game's in a pretty good spot, personally. Yeah.
Yeah. I have maybe not played that high of a elo. I was like Diamond 1, very close to Master last season. But as you said, it's really hard to branch out. And I've just used Parallel for my off time from Illuvium, which hasn't been a lot. But yeah, before it was mostly Qatari, like you said. And now I had a lot of success with the Cathy, how do you call it? Burn deck or something, like Face Hunter kind of thing.
Yeah.
That is so much fun, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Both the top decks, both the Neve, which is Shroud, and the Cathy, which is Markolian, are both effect decks.
Yeah.
So not a very minion heavy or unit heavy meta, which is interesting because most of the decks previous have been very heavily on units, and now the two best decks are almost entirely effects or spells, as they would be called in other games.
Yeah, it's been like super mid-range deck meta before, right? You just played like the most stats on the board every turn. And I mean, I guess you kind of still do that, but you do have different branched out win conditions, right? Because Neve, sometimes it is the right call to just do nothing, and the next turn you play the AoE card or something like that. And in Cathy, sometimes it is the right call to just attack face instead of just playing for the board and so on. So I think that's certainly more interesting. I think the main problem is just going first and second in the game, right? Because Cathy Mirror going first is just utterly insane. It's the same as the Skippy Mirror. And then with Neve, I think, like, I don't know, I'm like one tricking short, right? I'm mainly playing New Dawn. I played a fair amount of Neve as well. Like, it just feels so miserable going first on Neve because you're just out of cards.
I agree.
All the time it feels. I don't know.
In a sense, that's kind of another thing that's refreshing about this meta is that for the first time, actually in Parallel, since the beginning or since I've started playing, or since the beginning of time, I have read and heard about the metas before, is that we actually have a deck that prefers going second. And that's not to say that the going first versus going second thing is solved in Parallel. It is far from solved. It is a huge issue. It's a huge issue in all card games, basically. But it is a really big problem in Parallel at the moment. They tried to fix that with the shield pod, the O2 for the defender for the player going second, but it hasn't really done much to alleviate the advantage of going first. But I do feel like the Neve deck really wants to go second. It really does feel like it sucks playing that deck going first, unless you have a very specific draw of like Singularity Steward, which is the O3 into Void Trapper into Spectre Attack Craft. Unless you have exactly that, it feels awful. So that's another plus for this meta, I think, that finally we have a deck that thrives on going second. So that's good. Another point in the
before I forget, I feel like that the window of opportunity is shifting away from me to finally announce you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Welcome everybody to our podcast. And we're here with Sparrows.
Thank you very much for having me.
One of the big names in Parallel. Really cool to have you here, as we both like to also play Parallel a lot. I think Viper a little bit more than me. And about this going first issue, Viper, it was in Hearthstone. We had, how was it called again? The coin. Yep. And the coin made it so that going second was usually beneficial, right? Because you always had that coin in the end. No, it was still going first.
Dependent on the deck. Like, it's like the example right now of Cathy and Neve that we had. In Hearthstone, it very much depended on the deck. There were like a lot of decks that wanted to go first. Usually, the more like aggro to mid-range-ish decks, then the decks that were leaning a bit more towards control/combo prefer to go second, because you got a coin and you got an extra card. Now, coin made usually like the combo to mid range, the combo and control thing. There wasn't like a crazy difference in going first and second. If those played mirror matches, but if the mid range decks, for example, they played that, it was insane because yeah, you just drop it's the same thing as in Para, right? You drop the stronger card on turn 1, but then in Hearthstone you could at one point have this tempo swing play where you play 1 mana ahead of the other guy with the coin. Like, I don't know, I do turn 1, 2, 3, and then the other guy does a 4 mana play, even though they are only on 3 mana as well. So there was, if you timed it well, kind of the comeback potential from just this inherently behind on the board position. And then if you go second, it's the same as in parallel, right? You have more cards, so you're supposed to play for running the other person out of cards. Sometimes, though, the problem is that by going first, you generate such an advantage on the board that the guy going second has to play very inefficiently, and then you don't actually have this card advantage anymore because the ones you use are less efficient. I also in this like combo-ish deck, I mean, for example, like a super common thing was like Mountain Giant based decks in Hearthstone, right? Where going second, you have the coin plus the extra card, so you have way more cards in hand. And Mountain Giant was a really big unit that got cheaper if you had more cards in your hand. So it was a tremendous difference if you go second or first when you played that card. Going first, the card was some decks like almost unusable even because yeah, you just like some mage decks especially because you just didn't have the size of cards in your hand anymore.
So do you think they solved it kind of good, giving some decks the advantage on first, some decks played around second, kind of what Sparrow said now in parallel, where we see one deck already being favored when it goes second, or having a better time when it goes second?
I don't know. In the end, it's still the same issue where like the game is not balanced if you go first or second, but it is a turn-based game, so everybody like one guy has to go first and the other guy has to go second. If you have a scenario where two decks that both want to go first play versus each other, well, then the guy who goes first has tremendous advantage. If you have one guy that wants to go first versus a guy that wants to go second, then it's like a more fair setup, right? So this is the best solution there is, but if you queue the mirrors, for example, of this setup, then it's still like bad.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, it is okay. It is definitely better than if every single deck wants to go first, but it's not really solved in that sense.
I assume you played a lot of Hearthstone back in the days too, Sparrows. Do you guys know each other from back then?
No, I played before Viper. Before Viper became the runner-up Hearthstone World Champion. I sort of stopped playing, I think. I mean, I'm sure Viper was around. I think Viper, you probably played Hearthstone since it came out. But I didn't know of Viper, and I'm a nobody in Hearthstone, so nobody knows who I am. I'm just a casual in the background. But yeah, I played a lot of Hearthstone, but I stopped before the people like Viper, Bunny Hopper. I sort of knew Hunter Ace a little bit. I remember, like, I'm so old that I remember Tice when he first started playing Hearthstone. I remember competing against Tice in Strivewire tournaments, which was an internet site that used to run third-party Hearthstone tournaments, and you would compete for $5, and that was the
probably
prize.
Saw it in there. I did a lot of those as well.
It was really good, and like Tice had like 50 viewers on his stream, 100 viewers on his stream, like super early days, and like he was a nobody, and I was in his Discord like in the early days, and so I'm from like the beginning of Hearthstone. I started playing like when the whole meme started of Nax is out, like so long time ago.
Before
so
Wild,
no, we don't know each other.
I played at those times as well. Like I played before Nex, but I didn't play a lot. I think at that time, when was Nex? It was 2013. I think like I was still in high school back then, pretty much, and I was playing. Yeah, like Hearthstone it's really old. Like for me, right? It's like a 14. Hearthstone is just I don't know. I was in high school. At the time, I played still a lot of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! I was doing a lot of like buying and selling business things with Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff as well. I was playing League of Legends, I was playing World of Warcraft, and then Hearthstone was like the side game that I just played like every now and then, or maybe on my phone back then. That was the amazing thing about Hearthstone back then, right? It was literally the best game you could play on your phone before
Yeah.
our mobile phones turned into gaming consoles from, I don't know, 20 years ago, basically, or even better than those consoles now.
Yeah, I loved playing Hearthstone on my phone. I used to like when I was working at that time, like I'd take a break at work and like just like get some Hearthstone games in real quick. It was the best, and it
Yeah.
was so nice. It looked so good. I mean, phones were still pretty good like 10 years ago, but they're nowhere near as good as they are now. But it was just like you played it on the computer and it was awesome, and you played it on your phone and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like that just didn't happen with games. It was amazing. Like Hearthstone really like took the card game world by storm. Like that's why it's as big as it is. It was like mind-blowingly good when it came out.
Yeah, pretty much the first time where you could do like a proper PvP game, like a competitive game on your phone. It feels like, at least for me as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, for real. I think there was, what is it, like Honor of Kings, or like some MOBA-ish game that's also super old, but that was not really in the Western world. I think Western world was really Hearthstone, like the one mobile game that people really, or like the mobile playable game, right? People really are serious about.
Even in terms of just TCGs, you know, like nobody really played TCGs online. Like there was no computer games for card game players. There was you could
Yeah, they
play
all
Magic
sucked.
Online, which was like horrendous and is still horrendous now. And like there was hardly anything for card game players. It was all tabletop still.
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, Pokemon, everything was still basically played down at your local store on a Friday night. And they really captured like that whole audience. I mean, there were people doing it, and like even like I said, Magic was doing it. You could play Modo, but it was shit, and it's still shit. Now they have Arena, thank God. Arena's quite good, but yeah, there was really nowhere for everyone when they finished playing their card games on a Friday night to go, and Hearthstone really solved that problem. And it was a bigger audience, I think, than anybody realized. I don't even think Hearthstone probably knew that they were going to, you know, take that much market share from other games as they did when Hearthstone really started to take off, especially with like the competitive scene and tournaments, which is when Hearthstone was at its peak.
Yeah, Hearthstone peaked like 2018 with 100 million players. That's insane. Like I'm not even sure if TFT right now has 100 million players, for example.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest strategy game that we have in the world right now. So, like the market of people always say like, "Oh, parallel card games, it's a niche game and small player base." I don't actually think so. Like because there is, like you said, before Hearthstone there was no good online card game, and I think Hearthstone has kind of gone downhill, and there's no good online card game again now. So I think somebody can grab a really big market share if they just make a really good game and capture people with that.
I think it was pretty clear to everybody at the time when Hearthstone just got rid of their competitive scene with the whole ladder grind and the points and the 10 different ways to qualify for, you know, different tournaments throughout everybody's regions. I think it was pretty clear to everyone at the time and everybody who was watching and people who played other card games and were looking in and realized that like Hearthstone was going to go downhill real quick as soon as they started messing around with all of that, because that was what made Hearthstone what it was like. And when it was on Twitch and it was like had the most viewers on Twitch, and we're talking about like League of Legends and stuff was getting played on Twitch, and Hearthstone was getting more viewers than League of Legends. Like it really like took the gaming world by storm. And then they changed all of that, and it seemed like overnight nobody talked about Hearthstone anymore. And so that's where I think Parallel comes into it, and I think is really a good opportunity for Parallel to steal that market share, because their $500,000 new league that they've got running at the moment is going to eventually bring those kind of players back over and could reignite that fire in competitive TCG players.
Funny anecdote, like literally yesterday, like an old guy that I know from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Hearthstone times, the guy was known as the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Player in the world for a decade, basically. And he just randomly messages me after years, like, I've seen you play Parallel. Like, what can you tell me about it? So,
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's sometimes like there are more eyes on things than a lot of people realize even. But it's just they maybe they don't know who to ask, or they don't want to like publicly approach things, right? Because they're like, I don't know, content creator, streamer, whatever, and NFT is bad and Parallel bad and whatever narrative still. I think that's gonna shift overall more and more, because I think you just need to make a good game, and then people are just gonna okay, it's a good product, I'm gonna use it. That's always my mindset on like all of the technologies, right? It's always new technology bad because it's gonna fuck over some other industry, and then that other industry and people in it are always very incentivized to say it's bad. It's like I don't know, the post office hated email. I don't know, people who hate horses hated cars, and
Exactly. I mean,
newspaper hate internet
I
and
have
so on.
I like this conversation. I have an interesting thing about that because it's when Hearthstone came along, everyone was like, "Oh no, you can't do this. You can't put it online. This is bullshit. You can't have digital assets. That's ridiculous. We're not going to have our cards in our hands. We're not going to have this is a joke. This is a ripoff. What a scam. We're buying cards in this digital game and we have nothing to show for it. This is bullshit. Nobody's ever going to stop playing on a Friday Night Magic. They're not going to stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh to go and play this crap Hearthstone game." And Hearthstone was like, "Well, I think there's probably a market for people who kind of like to collect things and digital." And everyone was like, no. There was so much hate. And now we're fast forward to a time where we've got Web3, different kind of digital asset with NFTs where you actually own your cards. And now Hearthstone is the one whose like market share is getting taken away, and they're like, "No, what a scam. All these places that are making NFT card games, they're all scams. They're going to take your money. You can't resell them." So I find that I love that conversation of, when Hearthstone came along, they were the NFT game. And everybody hated them and said that they would fail. And they were like, "Hell no, we won't. That we definitely know that this is what people want." And they were right. And now other Web3 TCG games have come along and they're stealing from Hearthstone. Hearthstone's like, "Hell no, you're going to fail." And they're not, because people do want to own their own shit. And when they want to stop playing, they want to get back, even if it is a tenth of what they put in. I would love if I could just fucking take my Hearthstone account and get, a 20th of the money back. That would be awesome. I would
be
love
great.
that.
I've tried to sell it. I think I can say that I've tried to sell it in other ways, which were not really allowed, but like my full Blizzard account, because I also put in like 100,000 hours in all the other games. And now I'm kind of done with it. And it's just sitting there, which is kind of sad. So I tried to sell it for a few $100, but yeah, it didn't really work out. Back in the day, I traded like World of Warcraft accounts, like my underwear. Didn't trade underwear, but
Yeah, I put tens of thousands of dollars into Hearthstone over the years. If I could get back a tenth of that, that would be a couple of $1,000s that I could put into something else. That would be great.
After all, it turns out they are really the scam, because they are like NFTs, just without ownership, right?
Yeah, so I find that whole how we've come full circle amazing, and I really just I wish that Blizzard and Hearthstone would just like look at themselves and go, "All right, we need to adapt and change."
Because like the devs, right? That they just see, well, I'm gonna lose my job, and I really suck at my job, so nobody else is gonna hire me. That's what the Hearthstone devs, in my opinion, nowadays at least think, because I don't think anybody who's actually capable of a lot of shit works there anymore. They all got hired by other companies to do other things and games, and it's like a bunch of people that are like hired from the community or from the player base and whatnot. And I don't think they have been doing a great job on like expansions and metas and whatnot. Obviously, I'm kind of out of the game since 2022, but I was really unhappy from like 2019 to 2022, and I couldn't take the game as serious anymore as I used to. While I was still competing, I was still competing like relatively successfully while putting almost no time into it, because everything was just a copy of previous things. You just said, okay, so this is the new token druid deck. Well, this time there's a buff card that costs 2 mana and gives +2/+2 instead of 1 mana and +1/+1. And this card costs, I don't know, 1 mana and summons 1 token instead of 2 mana and summons. It's like, well, it's the same shit as before, and they just kept reiterating that over and over and over.
Yeah.
So I think they had to do the thing that Yu-Gi-Oh did. Yu-Gi-Oh, after like 11 years it was, after 11 years, Yu-Gi-Oh introduced like a new type of cards. And then every like 4 years after that, they kept doing that. They introduced something like genuinely new to the game, so that it wasn't just copying the previous thing over and over and over again. I think Hearthstone really, that's my take on what Hearthstone should have done on the game design side. They should have just introduced something new. like the extra deck of Yu-Gi-Oh, something like summon this creature if you sacrifice 2 imps or something. That's like a cool demon creature, and then you can like super consistently play that, and you just build your deck around those extra deck cards. Yeah, that was my take on that, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's like what TFT did, right? Like TFT did 3 sets, and all 3 sets were kind of similar. They got away with it because they introduced new characters, and new characters did different things because they got 200 different characters in the Riot universe that they can play with. But then they introduced Galaxies, which threw a different spin on the game, and then they introduced other stuff that stuck around for the long haul, and have slowly improved the game over time. And like card games are really not doing that. They just kind of stand stagnant and not trying to innovate really and change the way that games are played, which is one game that I did pick up recently is the One Piece trading card game. And Bandai made that, and they've had 2 or 3, I think, card games before that, which if they were in the NFT Web3 world, they would be the Zagabond of trading card games, where they tried a few things and got it wrong. I don't know if you know that story with Azuki, the whole Zagabond story of he did like funks and stuff, which were like turned out to be rug NFT projects before he made Azuki, and now Azuki's the most successful in the world. So it was like trying to get it right before the main drill. Anyway, that's another story. Bandai is kind of like similar to that, where they made like Dragon Ball Z card game and other card games, and they're basically like rug pulls in the Web 2 world. They're absolutely shocking card games, and like everyone that's put money into them, it's all gone to absolutely dust. And now they've made One Piece, and One Piece is like one of the best card games I've played in the last like 5 years. It's excellent. The mana system that they have there is amazing. It doesn't matter if you go first or second. Like they've got these cards where when you take damage, you get a card from your life pile. The cards are your life. So you lose a life, you take a card. It's just a really interesting concept and a really interesting take on TCGs. And I wish more TCGs would try to, change the wheel and make something more innovative and more interesting. And I think One Piece has really done that, and I really love that card game a lot.
Yeah, no, I think One Piece card game is really, really good. It's like if One Piece card game would be online, right? That could be that online card game that everybody drives towards, because so many of my old Yu-Gi-Oh friends have been telling me like you have to start playing this game as well. Like for one end, they said it's like easy money because the prize cards are worth a lot, and like there's like a line of people that wants to buy them. So that's super easy, and the game itself is really good. It's like you said, it doesn't really matter if you go first or second. I think they've looked at a lot of card games and just taken a lot of good parts from it, right? Like like in Pokemon, for example, you need to kill the enemy Pokemon, then you take your prize cards. And here you take damage and you get a prize card, so it's less snowbally. It's like better for playing from behind, essentially, in that sense. And you also have to think, do I give the other guy a card or do I not give the card? And so
the life cards also have effects that come into play when they're taken. So there's so much to think about. The game is like super simple, but like deceptively so, which I think is what you want from a game. You want it to be simple, and you want people to be able to sit down and just be able to play it. But then for the people that are very good and who are into it, who can find an edge, I think there's definitely an edge in One Piece. And I really think that that's an amazing card game. I think more people should look into playing the One Piece TCG, because it's really, really good, and definitely one of the best games I've played in the last 5 years, especially in the TCG world.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I'd have like time to just go and start playing TCGs again, I'd probably pick up One Piece first. Like I like Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm more up to date with Yu-Gi-Oh because there is Master Duel, and I can play Yu-Gi-Oh online. Not in a one-to-one equivalent to TCG, but almost, because they have like different banders and slightly different cards available. But it's pretty much the same game, just like slightly different takes on the decks. So Yu-Gi-Oh kind of has that, and I think it's one of, or not. I know it's one of the more successful online card games. I think revenue-wise, it's like top 3, maybe second or something even. So I don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh's been kind of doing that, but that was also a letdown for me. I thought that Master Duel, like online Yu-Gi-Oh, would be far more successful than it is. Then again, Konami also, when they introduced it, they talked really big. We're going to have esport and tournaments and this and that. And it's like, yeah, you have things, but it's not to the grand thing that you promised. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so funny you talked about One Piece, or this was one of my favorite things because I was also growing up playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and then One Piece trading card came out. But I think the one you're talking about is something else because this
Yeah,
has
it
been
came
a
out
while
last year.
for long. It's like this.
Yeah. I've
Seen
seen
that?
those recently pop up in marketplaces for sale. I think
I
they're worth
still
quite a
have
bit.
my full. That's my Straw Hat deck and my full fucking I don't know.
Paz just found a bunch of money at home.
Yeah, I was so proud. And the thing was, we all started playing like all me and the friends and everybody at school. No, not One Piece, but everybody at school was playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and we started playing this. And I was a bit of a spoiled only child, right? So I begged my mom to buy me a lot of cards, and I got them all. And I was bashing every single one of my friends nonstop. Nobody could win anymore, and everybody stopped playing, and I was all left alone. We were on the countryside. There is no Friday magic. There is nothing. So then we stopped playing, and since then I have like the best decks, the best cards, undefeated. But yeah, it just died with being too successful. I played to win.
Suffering from success.
Yeah, it was play to win in that case because the others didn't get so many cards.
Yeah, that's the other thing about the One Piece TCG. I actually don't play it at the moment. One, because I wanted to get more into Web3 games and I don't have all that much time to like go to the store and play Friday night Magic or whatever it may be anymore. But also because the card prices for One Piece just like went through the roof at the end of last year. Like I bought boxes of Romance Dawn, which was the first booster box that came out for One Piece, and I bought them for like $250, and I sold them like 3 months after I bought them for like $1,000, and cards were selling for like $6,000 a card. It just like it went off, and so I've played so many card games, and I've been around TCGs long enough to know that cardboard goes to zero on a long enough time scale, always, 99% of the time. It's very rare that you have a Black Lotus, whatever anymore. And also, you're not going to get those cards in 30 years' time because everybody's sleeving cards now. And so cards are not going to be rare in the future. You're not going to have the Black Lotus situation ever again because all the cards that could be the Black Lotus, 4,000 people have it sleeved. And so in 50 years' time, 4,000 people will still have it sleeved. But I've been around long enough to know that everything's going to go to zero. So I had to sell my whole collection, and I like 10x'd every card that I had, including commons from One Piece, because the prices just went so bonkers.
So can I sell those still? Or is it
yeah, I think they're worth quite a bit actually at the moment. They seem to be popular. I had never seen them before until recently, and seen them popping up in the Australian marketplaces. Yeah, I'd never seen those, or even knew that there was a previous One Piece card game before the new one came out. So you should try and sell them now.
Yeah, I will if it eventually goes to zero anyway. Especially now that they have another one, it's probably the last chance. I loved it. I hope, or I like to believe, not only because I won so much, but also because it was a really good game. Like it was already back then. It broke out kind of. It was very creative, not comparable to the other ones. I felt like.
Yeah, it's kind of true, right? Like ever since essentially Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic, those are the TCGs that are proven over time, and everything else died. Like literally every single other game. Maybe some lasted a few years, but everything else had died. I don't know if One Piece is gonna be different because it's like hyped like nothing else was hyped, late and everything, and the IP is far stronger than I don't like any of the other. I can't even remember like
except for Pokemon, probably. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I mean of like the new ones essentially, right? Like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon have crazy IPs. Magic obviously has the first TCG, but then everything else had like an anime and like a couple sets, and then died out, right?
Yeah,
like those were not as catchy as One Piece. That's like 1,100.
I think One Piece is just such a damn good TCG that I really do feel like One Piece is going to stick, because I think the game is good, whereas some of the other games that have come and gone, have just not been that great, and they're kind of been clones of other games. Whereas I think this One Piece game is really innovated, and I think the systems within the game are really good. And the only thing that's a big worry with this is Bandai is known for power creeping too fast, too soon. And so there is a worry that the One Piece card game could just like get out of control to the point of like Yu-Gi-Oh, where like the person who goes first wins on the first turn, you know,
I was
and then
about to
like
say
kind of
that.
ruin themselves that way. But we'll see what happens.
Yu-Gi-Oh is not that crazy anymore. I think people overhyped that a bit as well because
Yeah.
you still had like the same people doing well every single year, right? So it wasn't just dice roll meta, and it was always easy to blame like the dice roll. And maybe for like a year or two or something, it was like pretty messed up. But I mean, now you just have like a bad meta in a card game. If it's around for like 25 years for a bit, that happens. Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot about because they introduced hand traps, right? So Yu-Gi-Oh is obviously not mana-based card game. It's by far the fastest game. You can do the most stuff in one turn in all of those games, but it's also the most interactive game in the enemy turn. Like you're essentially both playing at the same time. It's like pseudo turn-based at this point anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh. I spent infinite hours in Yu-Gi-Oh. I competed. I was like, I don't doing business in that space and so on. So I like Yu-Gi-Oh a lot, and I like modern Yu-Gi-Oh a lot. I know a lot of people are like, well, they like the old formats, and Yu-Gi-Oh also they offer people a lot of old format events. Like both, there's a lot of like unofficial online clients where you can play the old formats, but also in real life events, they just organize big tournaments with old cards, old metas essentially. And
Yeah, that's what's
it's really
great
fun.
about Magic as well. I don't even know if they have them anymore, but they used to be called Grand Prix in Magic, and then I think they changed like the name to Magic Fests or something. But yeah, essentially a 2-day, 3-day tournaments where you go in and play side events, and there's a main event. But Magic does the same thing where you can go and play in Legacy or Modern or Vintage, whatever format it is that you like. If you've got cards from 20 years ago, there's still plenty of people who will play with you at those events. And I think that's what gives those card games that longevity.
Yeah.
Makes sense. About the power creep, I'm interested in that because I fear something similar happening to Illuvium at one point. It's inevitable, right? It happens with every card game, but
Yeah.
you can then counter it with Hearthstone did it with wild mode, right? Or just in general, you counter it by disqualifying cards from the game at one point.
Yeah. What worries about you with power creep and Illuvium?
Because they have confirmed that they're never going to remove any Illuvials, so they're always going to be playable. But I cannot see this to be true in the long term. And at one point, they're still going to be playable, but in the wild ladder or whatever it is, I assume. I don't think you can design a system that scales up infinitely with more and more.
I think you can. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, did that, right? Yu-Gi-Oh does not have like these formats. Yu-Gi-Oh has a banned list with like maybe like 100 or 200 cards on it nowadays. It's not that many anymore, basically. And the way that Yu-Gi-Oh gives old cards meaning is that they make new cards that essentially require this one specific old thing. Like something like a level 4 water monster with 1,000 attack points, and then there's like one best option for that exact requirement or something like that. Or like a specific level type and then whatever. So I think Illuvium is kind of like similar, that everything has an affinity and a class, right? And then you have the composites. So I can see that a lot of Illuvials are just going to be, because you would, to power creep an Illuvial, right, you would need the same Illuvial on stage 1 with the same affinity, same class, but in better, every situation better. And then it would still have to have the same like composites on the next levels, right? And I think that is really hard to, like, you need an immense amount of cards, so to say, to do that. Like thousands of cards. I think that's like a 10, 15 years in the future kind of thing, where you actually have something that is one-to-one the same, but better.
Yeah. But I kind of was thinking about 10 to 15 years long term, but maybe that's too much to think about in gaming in general anyway, so.
I mean, I think figure it out then. Like, it doesn't have to be like, that's the thing, right? Like, strictly better is a really hard thing to accomplish. Or like, like you don't have to make it strictly better, right? Like, I don't know, Atlas, for example, is super simple illuvium, right? It's a water bulwark. It's like a tank with high energy regeneration, basically. And the ability is it gets a shield, and if the shield isn't destroyed in a time frame, it explodes and deals some damage, right? To power creep that, you would have to make something that is more tanky and deals more damage, and is also like a water. That's, I don't know. I really think it's pretty tough to do that, because you have so many combinations with the classes and affinities, right? There just has to be like one thing different in the entire line of the Illuvium, and then it's different.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things too that's difficult for TCGs these days is, and one of the things that not enough people take into account with Hearthstone. So what I'm getting at is, like, when Hearthstone started, it was essentially a brand new game, right? Because it was one of the first digital card games going around. And so when they first came out, they had really boring cards. So they had like a 0 mana 1/1, which was a Wisp, and they had a 1 mana 1/1 with Divine Shield. And they had cards that are like a 1 mana 0/4 Shield Bearer with Taunt, and a 1 mana 1/2/1 with Stealth, which was Worgen Infiltrator, and all the cards were very, very plain, very, very simple, and that was such a huge advantage for Hearthstone to be able to start with such boring cards, and they didn't have to worry about power creep for years. And they could do that and still have an audience that was keen to play the game, because it was like, cool, this is a digital game, it's a new card game, we'll give it a try, and it's still fun, even with these boring cards, with my Earthen Ring Farseer 3 mana 3/3, restore 3 health, which, like, if you printed that card these days, it would do nothing in any card game ever. Like, the card sucks. There's a card similar in Parallel now, it's a 3 mana 3/4, which is pretty good stats for a 3-drop, and that heals based on a revealed bank card called Doctor's Assistant. And I mean, nobody plays that in Parallel at the moment, and it's a better card. So, Hearthstone had a really huge advantage when it came to power creep. And so for TCGs these days to capture an audience's attention, it's very hard for them to start with 1 mana 1/1s and 2 mana 2/2s that are vanilla. Because who's going to want to play that game when you can already just turn on Hearthstone and get straight into playing stuff that does 10 things with one card, and Magic the Gathering, which has like novel-sized text on cards. And, so I do feel sorry for TCGs these days, and Parallel has some pretty insane power creep for being in alpha. Like, it has some pretty nutty cards. There are cards in Parallel that do not even see play that are some of the most broken cards I've ever seen in any card game. I mean, there's a card, I can't remember the exact stats on it, but it's the Victory, I think. It's a Markolian card. It's like a 5 mana. That's
the ship, right?
Yeah, the ship.
Yeah, it's 6 mana 4/5.
6 mana 4/5. Hang on, I can get it up in a second.
Yeah, I think it's 6 mana 6 mana 4/5 shielded evasive. Assault, deal 4 damage to any target, and then the first time the enemy plays a unit, it takes 2 damage every turn.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the shielded. So shielded is like Divine Shield for those of you who play Hearthstone. Evasive means it can attack through taunts or defenders. And yeah, when it comes into play, it deals 4 damage to a target.
I know shielded is like 1-time spell proof, not Divine.
Yeah. And then, like, when your opponent plays a unit, it gets dealt 2 damage. Like, this card is absolutely bonkers. It's insane, and it doesn't see play. Like, that's how insane the cards are in Parallel. Like, there's a card called Magna, which is a 3 mana 3/2 that comes into play, and it has something you have to fulfill
like
before
Lemmy,
it activates. Right? Like, you have to have a unit die, but it draws you a card, it damages the opponent, and it shoots something for the power of the card. So it's a 3 mana 3/2, it deals 3 damage, and it can be buffed as it comes in and make it a 3 mana 4/3, and it can deal 4 damage. Like, that card is absurd, and that's already in Parallel. And those kind of cards are like pushing out stuff like the Victory, because the early game is so already overpowered. So I don't know. I think Parallel's given themselves a hard task with power creep as well.
No, like, I agree, but also I think the issue with Parallel of higher mana cost cards is that there's this very little comeback card. There's very little reactive stuff, there's very little AoE that's good in the game. Like, most of the cards kind of just suck, or they're very expensive. So if one player gets really ahead early game, the other player just dies. That's also why going first is so OP, because you get ahead, the other guy just dies, and there's no AoE card that they can play to reset the board, and then the guy going first place on the board again, but has fewer cards, and you can trade 1 for 1 and you win. You can never reset the board in parallel. I think that's probably like the next power creep thing that they could do, where they just give us good 3 cards.
I was expecting something more like that to come along with Planetfall, to be honest, like a universal unit, 3 mana, 3/3 that deals 3 damage when it comes into play. I was really expecting something like Magna, but universal for everybody, or a 2 mana 2/2 that deals 2 that's a neutral card that everybody can put in their deck.
Yeah,
so you kind of just go 1 for 1 all the way up to big cards. But that didn't happen, and we still have the same problem where tempo is king and going first is way too strong.
Yep.
I think Parallel kind of has it has a hard time with the power creep cards, right? Because I see, I kept reading comments like especially people who stopped playing Hearthstone like a few years ago. They were like, these Parallel cards are so broken compared to what I played in Hearthstone like a few years ago. But then if you look at current Hearthstone, Parallel cards are like a joke. Like the current stuff in Hearthstone is just so much stronger than what Parallel has. So it's just the power level that we have to see on those games is just immensely high nowadays. But it's also, like you said, just what keeps people interested. Like people are not satisfied with, I don't know, the small, easy, normal card, and you play like a 1 mana stats and you attack the other guy. Like people don't like that. People need the crazy stuff. Like you said, a novel written on a card. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like always the crazy example people make, right? There's like a card that has like 4 effects printed on it, and you play it, and then that card searches the next card that has 3 effects printed on it, and that activates, and you play like, if the opponent has like no interaction with your turn, which usually they're supposed to have in modern decks, but let's say they just draw a pony, they have no interaction. You just sit there for like 5 minutes and you play like 20 cards, and then you're like, oh, now it's your turn. So yeah, that's like, people are used to like super crazy stuff essentially,
and it's fun, right? Like that's the fun part of playing card games. Nobody wants to just play 1 mana 1/1, 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3, and then just like bash them into each other, and then play a 4 mana 4/4. That's so boring.
The truth, it's also not only card games, right? I mean, I think Paz has been playing a lot of League, like more than me in recent years. But look at the League of Legends characters, how much text and abilities they have nowadays. It's like we can think back on the ability. They were like two lines of text on passive through every ability, and now like look at Aphelios or Way, or like their characters have like 9 abilities plus a passive.
Viego.
Everything is a novel. I don't know. So that obviously, like every game is just more complex because I don't even know why. Where it's like, I guess people are just like tired of the old things, and you're the one that makes a flashy new thing. Then that's cool.
I always had that thing where a new champion comes out and I would play it to try it out in ranked and would win. Like that would be my challenge. And I haven't done this in years since like all these crazy champions came out. I never even tried to. I saw the full spreadsheet of the 29 abilities. I'm like, nah,
Wait, it's 29?
I don't know. It's like it's over 20, I think. Like,
really? Oh, I thought it's like 3 versions of QWE each, and then like one R and thing. Like a friend who's like still playing League, like recently compared it to like Invoker and Dota, basically. I don't know if that's a fair comparison or not, but yeah.
Yeah, so I feel sorry for people trying to make trading card games these days, because where do you start that you don't like fall into we're worried about power creep on our first set versus making the game fun. Yeah, so it has been difficult for a long time.
How did they do it with One Piece? Also started with the flashy cards. Like,
I think the game is just so structurally different. I think that's the same reason why Marvel Snap has seen so much success. I think Marvel Snap is a great example of a card game that's come in recently and has captured a fair bit of market share, because the game is very different to all other card games. It functions different, but it's still a card game, and so therefore they don't have to come in as strong as some of the others. Like, it sounds harsh, but Parallel is essentially a Hearthstone copy, right? Like, all the abilities are the same. It's the same base game. Going first is strong. Going second sucks. Battle Cry, Muster, same thing. Shielded, Divine Shield. Like all these things are pretty much the same. whereas One Piece and Marvel Snap are very different card games, but still card games. So they benefit from having some weaker cards and still having the game be fun, because how the game functions is different.
All right. And One Piece, that one is only offline, right? I like physical.
There is a community build that
Kind of like Pokemon Showdown.
is like a sim, yeah.
It's like worse than a Pokemon, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's very, very basic, but it still has some like function that runs tournaments and stuff through it with Bandai from time to time. So,
that's cool.
Bandai accepts that it's okay to use, and it functions pretty well in terms of playing the game. And I would play it. I do play it. But if I was looking to get into One Piece, I would play that before going to a store, that's for sure. One Piece is it's a lot to take in when you first start playing it. Whereas Parallel is very easy. You just sit down and start playing Parallel straight away. It's a very easy game to pick up.
It's just a basic. It's like a super simple mana-based card game, and it just has a better mana system than like Hearthstone, for example.
Yeah, which is one of the appealing parts of Parallel.
Yeah. My take on games nowadays, to be like a simple but really good game, competitively speaking, you have to have. I call it noob traps. You have to have like a lot of noob traps in a game, so it becomes a good game. Like you need, so that essentially, like people cannot just like look at a spreadsheet or look at a guide and then copy the same thing every single game. But in Parallel, you have to decide which card do you bank, and it sounds like such a simple task, but it is really deep. Because do you need this card later on in the game? Can you afford not to have this? What are the odds of drawing something else that could fit your turn? What is your opponent going to do, and so on? It's very simple tasks that everybody can do, but it's really hard to figure out the optimum every single time. That's why I think that TFT is such a great game, because it has the most amount of these like easy decisions to execute that are really, really hard to figure out what is the actual optimal play to do. And I think that's what games need. That's what I really lacked in Illuvium Arena, for example. I thought the game was way too easy to like skill cap, because that didn't exist. Like every, like so to say, bad player, where you maybe even objectively could see that they have not much idea what they're doing, but they could just like copy what I was doing, and well, they have the same results that I have. There was not much that they could like screw up, basically. I think that was missing in Illuvium Arena. I hope that's going to change, and that's why I like Parallel a lot, because that is there. That's why I like TFT a lot. That's why I think those games are really, really good.
Yeah, I think mulliganing and what you bank and don't bank are two of the things where people are losing a lot of win rate in Parallel. I think those are the two things that you need to focus on the most. And when I've made guides for Parallel in the past, those are two things that I've focused on. And most of the comments that I've gotten is, wow, I'd never thought about this before. Yeah.
No, true. It's the same in Hearthstone. Like mulligan was such a hard thing where people would just like keep below average things like very often, or they wouldn't keep like the expensive card that has insane win rate in the matchup. Like I remember, like even in early Hearthstone days, like Sylvanas was insane in Druid, but people would not keep Sylvanas, for example.
Yeah, I have a similar theory to your noob trap theory. That I think for a game to be successful, I think the worst part of the game also needs to be the best part of the game. So an example for me with that is Magic the Gathering. The reason Magic the Gathering is one of the best card games in the world is because of its mana system. With the lands, so you have your mana in your hand, and there's nothing more frustrating in Magic than drawing your cards to play the game, and you have 7 lands in hand, or you have all units in hand, and then you have to shuffle them back in and draw 6, and then you've got 5 lands and 1 unit. But at the same time, that's the part of Magic the Gathering that makes Magic the Gathering the best card game going, because there's so much. Do I keep this hand? Do I not keep this hand? I'm on the draw. Can I keep a 1-lander? It's the most frustrating part of the game, but is also the best part of the game. And another example is TFT. The best part of the game is the worst part of the game in the fact that items. Do I make this item? Do I not make this item? But it's so much fun to make this item. But if I make this item, I'm probably going to lose in the late game, but it's going to help me now. It's so much fun to build items, but I have to build the right items. So the thing that's most annoying about the game and the things that you get wrong the most is also the most fun part of the game. And I think most successful games have them. The best part of the game is also the worst part of the game, and there's enough that like keeps you drawn in that you want to play, and it makes you annoyed and makes you want to get better at that part of the game. And that also that part of the game is just so much fun that it keeps you coming back for more, to try more things. So I think that's something that Parallel needs to try and figure out if it is going to stick around. It needs to find an element that is fun and but is also like a painful part of the game. That's just my theory on what makes a good game.
Oh, that's a fair point. It feels very rewarding if you do those things right. That's the main thing. Like deciding, like, okay, is this like early game item going to outperform the late game thing that I could do in TFT, right? I think that the thing that I hate the most in TFT is carousel, right? I think that is like really annoying. But on the other hand, it's like it is a relevant part of the game, and so yeah, it's like it's, on one hand it's frustrating, but then there are some games where you really hate it, and some games where it's really really good for you. So it's like emotional. You have to be emotionally invested in games. There have to be these ups and downs. Otherwise, it's just gonna feel mundane and irrelevant.
Yeah, and another example of my theory is Rocket League, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have played Rocket League, but the most frustrating part of Rocket League is trying to like drive the truck or car or whatever through the air and do aerial shots. Like, it's so hard to do that, but it's also the most fun when you finally get one right. I love that reward versus painful trying to get good at doing that. And I don't know if mulliganing and banking is enough for Parallel to have that, you know, that interesting part of the game that is really hard to master, but also fun at the same time. So I don't know how they're going to fix that or what the fix is, but I feel like Parallel just needs something more just to push it over a bit, because at the end of the day, it really is very similar to Hearthstone.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, right? Because that's why One Piece is doing, probably why One Piece is doing so well. It's the IP, but it's also a new game, right? It's like you said earlier, with like, even if you look at like Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, those are three incredibly fundamentally different games. Yu-Gi-Oh has no mana system. Magic has like the most basic mana system in the game, and then Pokemon essentially has no mana system. It's like crazy things that you can do every single turn, but you're limited to one attack per turn. So Pokemon games do go multiple turns. You cannot just kill the other guy in one turn. That's okay. There probably were like some decks that could do that in Pokemon history, but usually you cannot do that. And then Yu-Gi-Oh is like you can do most crazy things in one single turn. And like every other game that tried to copy those has failed. So you needed something to make something new. Like World of Warcraft TCG was also successful, and that kind of had the Magic mana system slightly different, where you could just bank everything, right? You could just like essentially send any cards from your hand as like a face down, or the cards were quests, so they would play them face up like a land, and they had some bonus ability. And then World of Warcraft TCG was doing okay, and Blizzard essentially killed that for making Hearthstone, and well, Hearthstone did a lot better. So that was cool. But I don't even think that they made World of Warcraft TCG out of the idea of making TCG, because they were selling the World of Warcraft mounts and so on with that as well. Like those were the rare cards. So there's like some. It's not a standalone game. People just bought like boxes to get the code for the World of Warcraft mount as well, and so on. So it's a bit different in that category. But yeah, what I wanted to get at is you usually have to make like something entirely new for people to be like, okay, this is cool. This is what I'm gonna stick with. And yeah, you're right. Apparel probably should try and find that new thing. But like, I mean, maybe like, I don't know, my take on like what I would have liked to see in Hearthstone. I would have liked to see an extra deck in Hearthstone. I thought that would have been a really good addition after like 10 years of the game. Maybe Parallel could introduce that. And then they make like all the shitty cards that have some archetype written on them, but nobody plays them. Like all of them are then suddenly like valuable, because maybe they just fulfill the condition for some card to be summoned. But that's also what Yu-Gi-Oh had. There's like a lot of cards that just need some specific condition to be summoned, like sacrifice I don't know, this specific level and this specific attribute or type or attack power or defense power, like whatever. But then you can give those cards meaning because they just like fit for the other thing that's the new thing. Oh, that's like the only thing that I can think of. Just like steal the extra deck, the meaningful extra deck from Yu-Gi-Oh, because no other game has that essentially.
Yeah. And I think like why TFT was such a huge success and why Hearthstone died in the end is because TFT, like you said earlier, they tried out everything. Every new set was a complete new mechanics, complete everything new, like every few months. And that way they found, first off, they always kept it fresh, even though it was a bit annoying to relearn the game. Also, it was kind of nice. That's also the part again where the best feature is the worst feature, where it's kind of annoying to
Wait,
get
if I
all
can
the
cut,
time.
didn't TFT almost die in like set 2 and 3?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was set 2. Was that the brand set where brand and like the blender nocturne stuff happened? I can't remember, but yeah, I think it was set 2 because it was like so basic. It was super basic, and it was. But at the same time, it was. It really favored people who went full math on it and figured out the strategies that worked the best. And so there was no way for people who were shit to compete with somebody who is good. It didn't have that balance of, okay, I suck at this game, but I'm going to play against someone who's way better than me. There's still a chance that I can win, which is the fun part of playing TCGs most of the time, that you can be a master player and lose to a platinum player. There is that element of chance, whereas I think that it was set 2 in TFT that just had absolutely none of that, basically. And yeah, that's when the game almost died.
Yeah. But then they found their rhythm, I guess, and kind of found their way.
Set 3, I think, is the best set still ever of TFT. I loved set 3. I thought it was awesome, and I loved 3, and I loved 3.5, and I loved Galaxies, and I just thought it really ramped up from there. I think the game really took off, and then later on they brought in Augments, which has stuck around. Was a great addition to the game.
Galaxies have stuck around as well, essentially nowadays, right? Like
Yeah,
we've had Galaxies and Augments in like the last few sets, basically. I think those are two good things to have, basically.
yeah.
They still have
Also-
the option of going
No, go ahead,
Blizzard,
Paul.
of re-releasing old stuff. Set 1 vanilla classic.
But I liked playing classic Hearthstone as well, but it was just like unstreamable.
There was
Like-
classic Hearthstone. Or did
Yeah,
talk
you
about
can just play classic Hearthstone now if you want.
Oh.
But yeah, it was just unstreamable.
And
That was
what
tough.
I wanted to get at, that I think with Blizzard and Hearthstone in specific, they have a hard time staying fluent, trying out new things, and they're kind of like, don't change a running system, and then they just drive it till it hits the wall.
Yeah, I
kind of
think
thing.
after Ben Brode was gone, like the new guy was just shit at his job.
Yeah.
Like I don't like to like shit talk devs or a lot of people like often, but because I think most of the time there's way more to the story than like the outside person sees, and like way more to this like corporate side of things and so on than people like give some devs and so on credit for. But the Blizzard dev team and so on, like just a bunch of like really, I don't know, just idiots. Like just like they are, and it's like people like working there or like having to do with them on other sides of things. They just told me like, yeah, it's just the guy has their opinion and he's not gonna change their opinion. Like it doesn't matter how many people tell him it's wrong or it's stupid. It's like nah, it's still gonna be that way. And I think that's like messed up. I mean that's why I like Web3 as well, because you have like I don't know, you have to respect people a bit more, and the concept of DAOs, for example, with illuvium, that you cannot have like the rogue game dev, so to say, that just does a shit product and gets away with.
Yeah, accountability with the DAOs, that helps. It's for sure harder to develop the game now, but they are getting held accountable every step of the way.
I think in the early stages of game development, I think it's a hindrance. I think it's pretty bad actually. But in the late stages, I think it's really good. It's also a troubling thing if you look at like card games, like Magic, Hearthstone, like all those games. They have cards designed and ready for like years before, right? So even if you would be like, okay, man, this guy has been like not doing a great job, but he already made like the next 2 years of products for us. Well, do we start reworking the next 2 years? Oh, that's tough. So there can be like in the card game design, if you have like a fundamental design problem, I think that is just there over the next years to come. That's like really tough to fix.
Yeah. It definitely felt like the heart of Hearthstone left when Ben Brode left.
Yeah.
He was really the heart and soul of that card game, and you could see, like, with everything that he did, that he truly loved what he was doing. And again, that's another reason why I think TFT is so successful. Is Mort Dog, like, he loves his job. It's not a job for him. It's a passion project, and he loves what he does, and he streams the game, he makes the game, he does his whole life is the game, and you can just tell how much he loves the game. And it'd be interesting to see if Mort Dog ever leaves TFT, what happens with TFT, because I feel like a lot of the heart and soul of that game will be missing if Mort ever leaves, because what an amazing man who just like loves his job. Like, that's what you want. And it's how a game designer should be, because you're making games for people, for God's sake. So I think that's another reason why TFT is popular, because people really relate to Mort Dog.
Yeah, you also need this like charismatic person that is presenting the game to the outside. Like that is what I think really left with Ben Broad on the Hearthstone side, because none of the people after that were like any kind of charismatic community-liked person. They always felt this like bit cold guy that's just telling people what you think or feel, or no, you're wrong, or this or whatever. And I don't know, Ben Broad felt just way more chill, and he was like a really like funny and nice guy as well. I got to meet him once, like 216 championship event something, and I don't know, really cool guy to hang out with and talk a bit with. And like another player back then, George C, he was his second championship, and that he qualified for. And he was saying, that was before Karazhan came out, and he was saying that like essentially back then, Ben Broad was like sitting in the corner of the room while they were like doing something else, like player related, and he was like playing with a candle or something that's like symbolizing like the next expansion essentially. And he was like doing shit like that to like players, and when they were like there for, I don't know, like camera stuff and interview stuff and whatever. So I don't know, that's like the game dev that is a bit like this romanticized idea on how people should be, but they exist, right? Like we have Ben Broad, we have Mort Dog, we have similar people in other games, and
we have similar people in Illuvium. That's what got me so excited about Illuvium, to see the Warwick brothers, who have this story of their Pokemon card collection got stolen, and this is the whole redemption thing, and they are like really excited to make a game, and really excited.
There's also everything. The arc of Kieran wanting to make something that's more successful than what Kane has, right?
Yeah, like there is so many arcs in there, and it's fascinating. It really grabs your attention and really gets that tribal following going, that cult following that the IP needs to be successful.
Yeah, I think Parallel has that as well with Kalos. He's definitely the person who, if you wanted to follow all updates from the Parallel universe, because Parallel is going to have multiple games and all sorts of other things going on, but if there was one person to follow in Parallel, it would be Kalos. And Kalos is kind of the person everybody loves in the Parallel community. He's our all-father Kalos. We love him. We all pray to him. And he's always so positive, and he does all sorts of podcasts and all sorts of chats with the community. And whenever he's talking with people, you know, he's enthusiastic, he's positive, he's only got good things to say. He has answers for how they're going to build things out. He has his finger in all the pies in Parallel, like from start to finish. He knows a little bit about everything, what's going on, all the team members, and he's really the lifeblood of Parallel, it seems, from a community member point of view. And he's our Ben Broad, he's our Mort Dog in this situation. So we've got a little bit of that going on in Parallel as well. And there's a few other people on the team that have interesting personalities, like Mr. Gon Koji, who's the balancer of the game and the design lead of the game. He's super interesting on Twitter as well, kind of like a dark, mysterious, shady, smart-ass kind of a guy, but like he's quite funny and does it in a way that's quite witty. So we've got a little bit of that going on in Parallel, and I hope they foster their own personalities a little bit more as we go on, because why are Web3 games building in public, but the people building them are not building themselves in public? I hate that when, you know, you see all about the game that's being built, but you know nothing about the people who are building it. I mean, they're people, we're all people. Like, let's just chat and hang out and show your personalities and let us get to know you as game devs. And you can be anonymous still and still have a great personality. Like I don't have my name on the internet. I'm Sparrows, but people still know me as for who I am as a person. So, I don't think the hiding behind the anonymity thing either is good. I want to see more Web3 games like really have their own Mort dog.
Yeah, it's like having a person that through like a merit essentially has a personality built around them, is likable and can show that they are knowledgeable on things, right? That's the main thing. And it's sometimes, I don't know, looking at like community people and so on, right? Oftentimes people always have how do I put it? Just a lot of takes, right? There's a lot of easy takes to be made on gaming, like a newspaper headline and whatever, and then there's a really deep story behind that, but that's not on the headline or the article or on the thing that people just like echo chamber repeat. But then having the person, or oftentimes the game dev, who then explains, well, there's like 10 caveats missing, and this also is not presenting the reality of the industry because there's this, and this other stuff. Having that is really valuable, I think, because it's all about educating. Like, I think in general, it should be, especially Web3, should be about educating people and not just like clickbaiting some echo chamber titles or novelties that people just like to hear because it like reinforces their beliefs that are there already, or it doesn't have to be. Did I see this like with a lot of the Web2? Like, I made this comment recently where I said like a lot of the IGN and like these websites and magazines, it's like CNN. It's just opinion journalism where they want to push whatever the writer thinks. This everybody has to think this now, so I'm going to write the article saying that everybody's thinking this, even though, well, the critics and the audience score are very much different. I think it was. I was about the last. I saw Scoriox retweet. I was about the last Demon Slayer season, the anime. I don't know if you guys have seen that. They were like, "Oh, this should have just been a montage," and it's like so useless to make 12. It's like it's like character development. I don't know. Like it's telling a story. Like it's on that anime example, right? But essentially, if you cut that short, there's going to be the criticism of like, "Oh, it doesn't make sense that the characters are stronger now. This is bullshit," and so on. And if you make it like longer, then it's like, "Oh, this could have been cut short." It's like I don't know. Like, sure, yeah, some I don't know. It's like comes down to personal preference, I guess. But I think like in general, that for example was not negatively perceived, but like whoever like writes that article sees that negative. Or I think Stellar Blade, like the PlayStation game, was probably one of the controversial-ish things recently, where it's like, oh my god, she's like, I don't know, doesn't have much clothes on or whatever. It's like, oh, I don't know, you don't have to play the game if you don't like it. And then, because Stellar Blade was the highest rated game ever, or like in the time frame. Like I'm recording this poorly, but super highly rated game by audience, by people actually played the game. And then you have the magazine critics are like, "Oh my god, this game is like so bad. This is like all about sexualizing this and that." It's like, well, I don't know. Is it really? Or maybe the audience likes it anyways. Like, whatever. So it's just like this disconnect on essentially like audience and what reality wants and what just like the I don't know, like the magazine or the writer or whatever thinks or tells or wants to believe in. And I think that's it's true in gaming as well, because we see a lot of movies do really poorly, right? There's like the critic score is good and then the audience score is bad and nobody goes to the cinema or nobody watches the new TV show or whatever. And like I think the same would happen, or maybe is happening to gaming to some extent as well, where like you make the game and like maybe the critics like it, but then the actual audience doesn't like it. Like you cannot be disconnected from the audience. You cannot make the game, I don't know, for the critics. Basically, you have to make the game for the audience that actually sells. But I hope that gaming doesn't go down like further that way. You just make, I don't know, bullshit that nobody actually wants to play.
Then it's interesting to see Illuvium's approach. For example, right now we have them streaming in the Discord the absolute alpha version of the Gauntlet mode, which is going to be kind of a TFT copy. And they really always, you can see it now on screen, it's super work in progress, right? This is the first view that the community actually has on the game. And I like how they always are super transparent. Like as soon as something is ready, they show it and they listen to the community, and whatever they say, usually they take it in, like they weigh that in a lot in their decision making. I think that's a great recipe for success. I'm so excited for TFT in Illuvium.
True.
Yeah, me too, very much.
And it's all free to play, so a very bold move, I think, from the Illuvium team, but I think it will pay off big time.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's like really, it's just I think there was like some Discord comments I replied to earlier today, right? Where like this basic idea that some people have, where it's like every game has to be free to play. That's the best way to monetize games nowadays. It's just a wrong statement. There's just some genres of games do really well with like skins. It's like MOBA games, battle royale shooters. The same for like the TFT auto battler thing, right? Like those things, like you can't sell card packs in those games. It doesn't work. Like how you're gonna sell like but you sell cosmetics in those games. But then you have other games. I think Hoyoverse is the prime gaming studio for that. They just recently released Zenless Zone Zero, like their second game after Genshin Impact, right? So Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, then Zenless Zone Zero, and before there was Honkai Impact. Like those are not free to play games. Those are games where you can play single player, free to play, and I don't know, do a bunch of stuff, and you can save up in-game currency. And you can buy the same boxes everybody else is buying, or you can spend a bunch of money and you have all the characters, and they are way more powerful than the people who don't spend money. There's very few cosmetic stuff that you can buy, if any, in those games, and they make 9 to 10 figures revenue a year. And there are online card games. Online card games don't really monetize cosmetics. Like, sure, there's like some stuff that you can buy, but the main thing that's monetized is cards. You have to buy card packs so you can play the online card game. So there's some genres that are really good for monetizing cosmetics, and some genres are not very good for monetizing cosmetics. And yeah, I think like Illuvium has a lot of different games essentially in there, right? Like the 1v1 team builder game, there are cosmetics in there, but the main thing people need the Illuvians to play. In Gauntlet, they just have the Illuvians. It's pretty hard to like how else are you gonna do it? You're gonna ask a person to have every single card in the collection to play the game.
Yeah, it's smart.
It's like too much. So you make that, and then you make them cosmetics instead, and it's like easy to onboard and so on. It's chill. I think in the recent patch notes, like between these like 2 hours ago or something, or from the time we're recording this, in case you guys want the recording, like Friday, like afternoon European time, basically. So the recent patch notes, they said something like you can re-roll these stats on Illuvians if you pay a certain amount of fuel. Now I don't know how expensive that's going to be, right? The patch isn't live yet. I don't know the amount. We don't know the amount of mainnet. We don't even know if that feature makes it into mainnet. But that feature, for example, makes the Leviathan game modes in Illuvium more accessible. Leviathan game modes meaning that in the non-Leviathan ones, you don't need to own like a specific version of the NFT. So the NFTs have random stats, and they can be maxed out or they can be really bad. And now you can re-roll the stats. I don't know how expensive it's going to be, but no matter what, it makes the Leviathan game modes more accessible because more people will have access to maxed out stat Illuvians. So the pay-to-win game mode essentially, maybe if that thing makes it into the main version of the game, is a lower barrier to entry than we initially thought. Is that feature going to make it in or not? Who knows? But looking at Gauntlet, for example, you need to own nothing, or you can play like the Leviathan thing where you need to own the entire collection. And the stats matter, and then you would need to roll the perfect stats, for example, because obviously in a competitive Gauntlet Leviathan game, which I don't know how many people are going to play there, it's a pretty pay-to-win game mode, but maybe somebody's going to make a cool tournament for it, and guilds and esport orgs and whatever, maybe hire players and they give them the stuff. Who knows, right? Maybe there's going to be a leaderboard with crazy rewards for it. Why not? They now have realistic access, if that feature makes it in the final thing, to have those things. Like it's actually realistic to just have a full collection with like crazy maxed out things. It's probably going to be really expensive, but if there's a competitive scene for it, maybe it's gonna work out. Like Parallel is pretty expensive as well if you want to have all the NFTs, right? Like the cards itself are like okay, but all the earning based things are super expensive. It's dropped a lot since token price dropped, but yeah, like I don't know. I think that Parallel to me was like an example of people are willing to spend a bunch of money if there are like rewards in the game for the things that spend money, basically.
Yeah, I think that's something that Parallel did well from the beginning. I mean, they had where if you held a certain amount of packs, then you got airdropped to the original keys. And then if you had, I don't know exactly how it worked, but then if you had X amount of the keys or whatever, then you got airdrop Prime, and then people use that Prime to buy the Planetfall packs, and then if you had all the Planetfall cards, and you got airdropped more Prime for having a set of the Planetfall packs.
So that's why I'm down so much money on everything. Okay. Now I understand.
They keep giving to, like, if you buy this and hold this, you'll get this, and then if with that, then you buy this and then hold this, you'll get this. They keep rewarding the people who support the ecosystem from the start over and over and over, and it seems like a good system. And that is why Parallel is expensive, because everybody's holding and hoarding things, because they are still getting rewards for holding them. So you can catch or stake essentially your cards in a set, and you'll get Prime rewards for those still, and stuff like that. So that's why Parallel is a little bit too expensive for a card game, I think. Still, it's very expensive. The Echo system, there's a replication system, so the original cards can be bred. If replication doesn't make sense, it can make a baby version of themselves, and essentially the cards are completely identical for in-game purposes. It just then can't be replicated itself. So that's a way to scale the game and make cards cheaper for more people as the game grows. So they've got some good tools in place, but the cost and the barrier to entry, I think, is a big problem with Parallel. Even though there is a lot still of cards around, but nobody's willing to get rid of them. And that's not something you really want in a card game. You really don't want cards being like $2,000 for one card. That's not going to get your Friday Night Magic people in, your Commander players in. You want more people.
Parallel doesn't have TCG economy, right? It's basically Hearthstone economy, and then you have the crypto DeFi stuff. Like everything you explained, that's more DeFi than actually a game, basically.
Yeah, which is why I like their moves recently towards making the free-to-play version of the game much more accessible for people, and is a better way to play, because who cares about getting 30 Prime a month from owning the cards and playing an extra $200-300 for playing? That's cool. If that's what you want to do and you want to own the cards, then go for it. That's cool. That's fine. But it's better to just build your AP collection, play for free, get good at the game, and try and win a part of $500,000. That's a way better goal to try and achieve. So I'm glad that they're pushing the free-to-play aspect and having really big prize pools, and not having a barrier to entry to that with NFTs as well is an excellent decision by Parallel. Anybody can play that, so you don't have to put a single dollar into Parallel. You can grow your collection quite well at the moment, and you can win your share of $500,000. So I think that's really the big draw point for Parallel, and something that they really definitely got right.
That's what they just announced, right? It was similar something to what Hearthstone did back in the days, with 10 different ways of being able to enter into the big pool. Yeah.
So if you miss out, you really don't deserve to be there. There's going to be so many ways to get in that it's going to require very little effort to get in. And if you just play to top 25 every month, or even to top 64, you're going to get a way to qualify through. There's in-game tournaments and stuff like that. There's the Paragon's DAO has a tournament every week that is free for anyone to enter, and you can win money in that tournament as well. Point. And that gives points. Yeah. So
really?
There's tournaments.
I haven't been playing those.
Yeah, they don't. I don't know if they've started to give points yet, but there will be tournaments that from Paragon's DAO that will be giving points. They haven't done any this month. I think the one they've got next week on a Thursday is the first one they've done for quite a while, and I'm not sure if that's got points in it or not, but I would assume so.
That is interesting. I'll actually start playing those then, I think. Because
I kind of ways to
I started playing Parallel in April, right? If the free-to-play entry in the game would have been better, there's a good chance I actually wouldn't have bought NFTs. But I was okay, this is looking, it's fine. I'm let me just buy one deck. And I was Planetfall is now. Okay, I have to buy more cards. And I didn't really care to learn a lot about the DeFi parts. I just accept the price of the cards because I could pay the price. I was well, it's really expensive, but whatever. And I was okay, maybe I should have read up on the DeFi parts, because obviously it was pretty stupid to pay as much money as I did for everything. But yeah, that's why I like the free-to-play thing now, right? I've also been stuck to one deck. and that's like the one NFT deck that I have. I was like, well,
Yeah.
people telling me, like, oh, you just play like a battle pass, you can complete. I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I cannot play any other deck. I do not have enough like scrap or whatever to craft the other decks. And I thought that's a pretty bad experience from like me getting into the game. Also, it was pretty hard to find a lot of information on anything. Like if I didn't know like a lot of the Hearthstone people, and I couldn't have just like DM'd them and like, yo, can you explain like the game side of me? I'm like, okay, they can explain me the game side. And when I ask about the DeFi side, it's like, no idea as well, right? Because there's, like you explained, there's so much to that. I think for parallel of like a lot of Web3 things in general, I would really love if they would have a better, easy summary that's like very visible in like their Discord or website about all of this. Because until even finding out about Scrap in parallel, I was like, it was like a few days. Because like no in-game tutorial said anything. And like I look at economy or YouTube, everything I find is like $sign clickbait video here, earn clickbait video. I really am so pissed at that shit. Like I don't know. People call Web3 like scammy and so on. It's like if you see
No
that,
wonder.
I'm like I'm with you. Like if you want to look up a game and you think the game looks good, and everything you find, because YouTube that's like what gets the most clicks and what YouTube algorithm thinks you is like $sign here, airdrop this, play to earn. I don't know. It just looks so shit. And you find nothing about the actual game, and I think a lot of really good games and gameplay kind of go under because of that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think Parallel could work on. I mean, the ecosystem is very deep and it's very overwhelming. Parallel is a very overwhelming game when you first enter the Discord or download the game, and I don't think the tutorial does well enough of a job, and you definitely don't get enough scrap. Even though the rookie mode gives you a lot of cards, it would be better to have scrap to build your own decks without having to disenchant what you're given to build things that are good, and access to like deck lists, and they could do everything better in that regard. They need to hire some good content creators who really like push out stuff that's super plain and simple and not clickbait and focuses on the free-to-play side. I'm glad that they've got the free-to-play side system in a much better state so that they can then build on that with content. I think that's more important to get the game in the right direction before pushing the content. So at least that's somewhat fixed in that regard. But yeah, they've definitely got a long way to go. Parallel is very, very overwhelming. A lot like Illuvium too. Illuvium I found to be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, Illuvium is it's the same, right? I think Illuvium has a little less DeFi things going on, but because it's essentially like 3, now arguably 4 interconnected games, there's like, I don't know, there's way too much. I've recently made a video about that, just like, I don't know, like literally going on the website and be like, this is a Duvitas, this is what a Duvitas do, these are Duvitas, these are different games and so on. Because I really think that is a annoying issue in a lot of the games where you probably lose a bunch of people because they just don't know what's going on and they don't have like a concise resource to learn things from.
Yeah, I don't think any Web3 game does it well. I don't think there's a single Web3 game that you can just go to the website and just follow a 1, 2, 3 step and understand what exactly is going on within the game. Everything is like clickbaity, or has like marketplace first and foremost at the top of the screen, or a link to an OpenSea, buy this. Yeah, I think Web3 does that incredibly poorly.
Yeah, it's very in the like everything is like super hard on DeFi and like scholar side of things and so on, because that's what Axie like had going for it. But I think the time is over. I think we actually have some good games, and you can just look at, okay, this is a good game. Here, this is how the game works, and these are like the DeFi elements after you've understood how the game works.
I think Parallel and Illuvium are one of the best still who do it really well. Parallel by just having a really straightforward free-to-play version of the game, which makes it easy, where it's like, oh, I don't understand the whole other side of things, but here is just Hearthstone and I can play this. And so I like that. And then Illuvium is just, I think they focused so much on being perfect, on being like AAA and polished and all of that they had a lot of ways of hiding all this confusing stuff and just like try to at least, which also is kind of wrong, hiding it, or just delaying it. So you look at it later, similar with parallel.
I
does.
don't think they're like hiding it, right? It's just Illuvium is essentially a Web 2
It's all
game.
the IMAX passport and everything. Like they try
Yeah,
really
yeah.
hard to make onboarding easy, but it's still hard for a Web 2 person.
Wait,
but
is it?
so hard.
Isn't Passport you just like make an account with it?
yeah, they create a wallet. It's kind of like
But if you've never done anything in crypto and you download this game and it pops up immutable passport and starts like zooming you out of a game into another window and you've got to sign up for this and that, and all of a sudden you're just like, fuck this, I'm turning it off.
yeah,
Like
it's intimidating.
it's overwhelming if
Yeah.
you've got no idea what any of the terms mean. And what is a mutable X passport? What the fuck does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I mean, it's
if
just
I've been in Web 2.
You need like a disclaimer of like, well, this is where you make your account for our game.
Yeah.
This is how you log into the game, right? That's like what it is. But I agree. Like you just need to.
It needs to come
make
later.
it visible to people.
And then probably it's the same like 10 years ago when a new technology, like we talked earlier, came out and everybody was like, wow, this is overwhelming. Nobody would. And then it just takes time. I think that's the only solution to our Web3 problem, where it's so new that it's hard right now, but soon it's just a standard. And I guess also maybe Hearthstone one day will have NFTs. We'll switch over because it just seems unlikely to have anything
No, I
else.
think Microsoft might make like I think they just scrap Hearthstone and make a new card game, because Hearthstone's code is limiting the game tremendously. It's like kind of like shitty, or not kind of. It is very shitty code. That's like the biggest difference to Parallel, for example, right? Like Parallel actually has it has a graveyard called Waste in the game. It has like a banish pile called Singularity in the game. You have cards that allow you to search through your deck. You can look through your bank. You can specifically pick something from the Waste or Singularity and play it or interact with it and so on. Like Hearthstone's code just doesn't allow for you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a lot of other problems that just come from that, where they're very limited in what they can do. That's, for example, my idea with I didn't think about that earlier, like the extra deck thing. They probably just couldn't code that into the game. Like it probably just is impossible to change anything. So like they just need to do like Hearthstone 2, I think, at some point. And I think they also probably want to, just from a monetization perspective, the same reason there's Overwatch 2, because they just changed the monetization model of the game. Therefore, they had to call it Overwatch 2. But Microsoft would probably just do that at some point.
Yeah. Only time will tell. And talking about time, I think we are kind of at our 1.5 hours. And
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It was good talking with you both.
Yeah, I hope to see you one day on the Gauntlet battlefield. I hope not to see you in the parallel queue. And hopefully we see you back here one day. It was really cool to talk to you.
It was nice to talk to you both too, and I can't wait to beat you in both game modes.